Welcome to episode 10 of the Quick Snap podcast. Getting a little bit of a late start here because David and I were logged in, ready to go, and we get a text from Danny, producer Danny.
Unprofessional.
And he told me there's traffic. And David, how would Bill respond? I think he would be something like this. Look, Danny, don't text me and tell me there's traffic. You live in Boston. There's traffic every fucking day. Don't text me and tell me there's traffic and accidents. We already know that. Expect the expected. Don't text me 5 minutes before we're supposed to start and say there's traffic. And then he would send you home for the day. Danny, maybe we should just...
Were you here in 21?
Are you talking about the shovel?
Yes.
I think we save that. I think that's such a juicy story. We wait for the first snowfall.
All right.
And we tell everybody how Bill educated the entire team on proper shovel use in the New England snow. And that's a little tease right there because it was one of the all-time moments for me in my Patriot career.
Yeah, but it was always great when something like that would come up, like snowstorm traffic, like, game day traffic. Like, I don't want to hear about it. It's game day. There's going to be traffic on Route 1. So, yeah, I mean, Danny, let's just, it's all about preparation, Danny. And I think the biggest thing when coach gets on you like that, you can learn from it. So, I think that's what you got to try to do here, Danny.
Yeah, hand up accountability. That's on me. Sorry, coach. But I'm a coachable guy, and I'll be better next time.
All right. First and foremost, David, post-surgery, I see the sling.
Yeah.
How are we doing?
Yeah, surgery went well. I think Dr. Provincial was pretty happy with, what he saw and what he could do. And I think something I knew, but it wasn't an acute injury. He doesn't think it happened, that San Francisco play or game. Thinks it more was, something I'd been dealing with, and that was just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. So, so it was good to get that done, and hopefully to be moving forward. I got, some little medical stuff going on, so I'll try to work through that and, figure all that stuff out. It's never easy with me.
It's never easy with surgery in general. And I always remember Alex Guerrero. I tore my ACL when I was playing for the Browns, but I valued Alex's opinion so much that I actually convinced the Browns to fly me up. They were actually playing the Patriots. And so I said, hey, can I travel with the team and go see Alex and take, how the NFL training room is. Yeah. Everybody kind of takes an injured guy. And so my guy Gordon, they were all on board. They say, yeah, go ahead. And Alex made one of the wisest decisions. He goes, you can cut a steak, but sewing it back together, it's never going to be perfectly back together. Yeah. And so that's the one thing with surgery. When you're cutting open and having to repair things, it takes a while to get back, and you do the best you can, but it's never going to be the same. And with hard work and good rehab, you can get back to a point where you want to be. But it's tough. It's definitely not a natural thing. And thank God for modern medicine, because those things that you tear a rotator cuff or you tear an ACL or whatever it may be, those are requirements, and then you have to just battle back through it. And it doesn't shock me that this wasn't a isolated thing. I know you've played through a lot of things. You're one of the toughest guys that I've ever played with, so I'm not surprised that you were probably playing with this for a long time.
Yeah, and I think one, we're so blessed to be in the situations we are, and anytime I've ever dealt with something, I just try to lean on that, right? And it's obviously tough. You're 32 years old and, you've got bad shoulders, knee, whatever. Guys have everything, and, that sucks and it's frustrating, but it's the price you pay to play the game. And, the game's been really good to me. And at the same time, the level of care we get is just unmatched. So, I just think that's truly blessed, to have, like you said, we'll have, a PT if you're a normal person, insurance pays for 3 or 4 weeks or something like that. And then it's kind of like slap on the ass and give it hell, brother, and yep. We'll have someone, 24/7 per se, individual care and things like that. So, we are so blessed in that situation, and you just take it day by day and keep going.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I couldn't imagine having a major injury, even back in college, because, you're not going to get the same amount of care. I remember, tearing my ACL was the first major injury I'd ever suffered in any sports. And, you go through a lot of emotions like we've talked about with you. And I'll never forget, you get the surgery and they're like, all right, 2 days from now, rehab starts, and I'll never forget like going in and you still are wrapped up from the surgery. Like, all right, come on, we're gonna start doing exercises, and that lasted 6 months,
Yeah.
and it was every single day, and so thankful for that care, and obviously it's part of the job, so we know it comes with it. But I FaceTimed you to check in on you on I think that was Saturday night, and you were out in Colorado recovering from surgery. Saw my boy Stiddy. He came and made a nice little visit to
Yeah,
you.
they had a Thursday night game, so
Yeah, so they had a little bye week.
an hour and a half away, and I didn't really see. It was good for my wife to get to hang out with them a little bit.
Shout out to Stidham,
Yeah.
Jarrett Stidham. I called him by his nickname, but just so everyone knows, one of those guys that we talk about the bonds that are built in the locker room and on the team. Someone that we're both very close with. Obviously, they move on to other areas, but those relationships last. And so, I'm sure it was nice for you to come out of surgery and have a familiar face there.
Yeah, they went out to dinner and stuff, and that allowed me to watch that Georgia game in a little bit of peace and a Tennessee game. So, which do you want to talk about that Georgia game or?
Dude, I was going to say the impressive thing was
I'm ready to talk
Texas.
about it.
Well, Texas rolls out the red carpet. They got all the celebrities there: McConaughey, Rogan.
Kirby was on one. Did you see his post
Yeah,
game?
and to me, I was telling Garrett, we were watching, and I said, this is kind of cool, when a team like Texas joins the SEC, because these are matchups that would normally be reserved for the playoffs, or if they
Championship, something like that.
Yeah, and so I know that Georgia smoked them, but to me, it was kind of like I kind of like this part of the SEC, like
No,
Texas,
I think it's
Georgia.
I think it's great, and I don't know how we're gonna, because I think they got rid of the SEC East and West division.
Right.
You know how you guys do.
Yep.
So I'm very interested to see how that goes. But those two DNs we got, 11 and 13. My goodness.
Yeah.
Those jokers took over the game, and then Beck's got to stop throwing it to the other team. I like the
We talk about
quarterback
it all the time, right?
I like the quarterback, and I think he does a really good job. And I think he's a good player. But for some reason, we get in these big games, and he just loves throwing it to the other team. And that's, it's one of those things when you survive it, which it happens. Every QB does it, and
Yeah, it's
I'm
inevitable. No one's going to not throw one.
I'm not talking David Andrews, the center. I'm talking David Andrews, the fan and quarterback, armchair quarterback. But, we got to stop throwing it to the other team.
There was one I remember seeing that he just kind of threw it up. I mean, those are the ones you kind of scratch your head. I mean, as a quarterback, you can't go out and play quarterback and say don't throw an interception.
Yeah.
It's you go through your reads, and if you see something, you throw it. Now there's times throughout my career where you just don't see people. I mean, there's things,
and then there's
like,
times like I saw one of Aaron Rodgers' interceptions, like it hit Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson beat that DB, and then it bounced right back to those are those happen, and.
Right.
But, 3 of them, that's a hard recipe to win. And so,
yes, it is.
But that was such a great, I've never watched a game back, like as a fan. And literally last night I was like laying down and I was kind of like, should I rewatch that game? Like that was pretty fun, and like, I was like, what are you doing? But
you might've been a little loopy from the, the medicine wearing
I
off
definitely
and
was
surgery.
in and out of it. I understood the gist of it, but, it was a great day for college football. It was a pretty good day to be laid up in bed.
I bet. All right, well, let's shift to the NFL. I mean, with you being out in Colorado with your travels, were you able to watch the Patriots game?
Yeah, I got this like pain pump thing. I didn't have it for my first surgery, and it's like a pain catheter. It's interesting, and but it came undone Saturday night, and I didn't know it.
Ooh.
So I was pretty
Rough.
Yeah, I was pretty messed up Saturday night, and so Sunday morning we were at the ER trying to get them to reconnect it and for the flight, and I'm trying to remind myself like I'm still like surgery was like Friday at 4, so like I'm still but I watched some of it, and then kind of once the pain got subsided, I kind of passed out a little bit because I didn't have a great night, and I watched some of it. And it was kind of one of those things, like I watched the first drive and I was like, all right, here we go. Things are clicking, they're moving the ball. And then I kind of passed out and then kind of turned it on, woke back up and, kind of saw the end of it and was kind of like woke up when things weren't going well. So, I don't have that much of an in-depth analysis to provide just because of the situation. I saw a lot of it.
Well, don't worry, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, and so, Yeah, I don't know. I thought there were some good things, and then obviously like some of the frustrating parts, it would be the run game and run defense and obviously giving up the big punt return, and that's things we
Yep.
usually try to hang our hat on. And I think Gerard kind of spoke to that after the game, and when you don't do that, it's frustrating.
Yeah, I think for me, I actually, because you watch the game for me, having played for all these years, and you're watching the TV copy, right? And so you have instant reactions just like the fans do. And then, you read what's being said, you hear what's being said. So I went back and rewatched the offensive plays, and I actually thought this is one of Alex Van Pelt's, best games calling the game. I looked at every single play and I thought, the only play that I kind of questioned was they tried to screen to Hunter, kind of a middle screen, and they got it against a match coverage, which isn't ideal for when you have a screen like that because the guy's just following
Yeah,
Hunter the whole time. It makes it hard. It makes it hard on the O line to try to get on him. But everything else, I thought, it's kind of been a shift with Drake going to quarterback, and I don't know if this is because of revolving door at center. He hasn't had a lot of experience taking snaps from under center, but it's a lot of shotgun, which obviously, the threat of the run game really changes.
Yeah.
And so you're running some of these outside zone plays from the shotgun. And it seemed like to me there was some check with me's, based off of the coverage. You can hear Drake saying can going to the second play, which I think on that first drive was really good. And we talk about the West Coast offense. A lot of it is scripted that first 15, and they did a good job. And, but the thing that I see is just a lack of detail from especially some of these younger players, the receivers. When I watch some of these routes being run, I'm not really sure how much detail they're putting into it. And when you're playing in this West Coast scheme, so much is about spacing. There was a few plays where guys are right on top of each other. There was a few plays, where they ran a play action pass that I'm very familiar with. I ran it a lot with Kyle in Cleveland and San Francisco. And even we had it in our system with Josh, kind of like these pop passes. And you get the line, you get the defense to suck up, and Booty's, it's one-on-one. You got to create some separation. And thank God, they have a Hunter Henry who's just so savvy and knowing where to be at the right time, because Hunter comes up with a lot of big plays. I know they got KB involved late. I think, to me, the game plan going forward has to involve Hunter, KB, Ramondre. You got to rely on the guys that are doing a good job consistently, because the one thing I see from these young guys, there was a play where Drake, almost throws a pick six. Well, if you go back and watch the play, he's trying to throw a stop route to Polk. Polk slips and falls. Okay, so number one, your number one receiver's down. He comes back. Osborne's kind of drifting on a shallow, which you've heard Josh say as a receiver, you can't drift on lateral routes because the guys will undercut it. Drake, feels a little bit of pressure when he didn't really have it, throws off his back foot, lobs, and it could have been a pick six. But then you go back to watch the film even more, and the other receiver, Booty, he's on the ground too. And so these guys aren't being disciplined enough to keep their feet underneath them. And I know people are going to want to pin it on AVP, but I actually, watching the game, there wasn't a lot of plays that I looked and I was like, well, I don't feel good about that play call. I mean, the run game is going to suffer if you are going to continue to be in the shotgun more with a less threat to run, because your angles aren't going to be as good. The running back's not going to be in rhythm. And so those are things that I think, you got to improve on. And I know we're going to touch on Gerard's comments and what you think about that, because obviously it got even blown up more when Bill's out there commentating on what his opinions are.
I think you talk about the details in the West Coast. I don't think it matters. West Coast,
Right.
freaking wing tee, for the veer, like it doesn't matter. Like the details are so important, and that's something. I think there's times people are like, well, why do we do this? And it's like, because how you do every little detail matters.
Mm-hmm.
And if you let it's one of those things, like if you let that go, and then that becomes a compounding issue. And
right, because it affects everybody else.
Yeah,
I mean, there's some routes where guys, we use the term, one grenade kills them all.
Yeah.
Like if you're in an area in a zone scheme against a zone defense, and there's too many guys in the same area, you're all dead because you're covering each other.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I don't think it matters AVP's offense, Josh's, like I said, the freaking wing tee down in South Georgia. Like details matter in everything, no matter what, and it's got to be the most important thing to you. And it's not just a receiver; it's a team thing. Like the details have to matter. If they say, "Hey, we're doing this," like, all right, do this, whatever it may be, And it's not to be a drill sergeant. It's not to be, whatever, an asshole. Like it's for a reason, because those details matter. And I think that's such a big thing, to me. And I think it's something that, I don't know. I always hate the like younger guy versus like, blaming like younger guys, but, I think it's an all around thing, but like, it's just different, like I can, think about like, coming in, like I did everything I could try to be perfect and, it wasn't, but I like to think that has something to do with my success, and if they said, hey, do this, like I was going to do that to the best of my ability. And I just think that's important. And so the details, I think, as a whole football team are important.
Well, and that leads me to the point I was going to make is when you came in and when I came in, there was some great leadership on the team, the players. Like to me, when I look back at my time in New England, the coaches did a tremendous job of game planning, preparing us, getting us ready, but the players set the standard of what the play was going to be. And now you're going through a season, obviously you're on injured reserve. Bentley's on injured reserve. So two key cogs in the leadership and the captains are out. Peppers is dealing with his off-field issues. Obviously, Jacoby is now the backup. Like a lot of the leadership and what compared to what we were used to is just not there. And so you're dealing with a young team that's learning. You're dealing with the offensive line that's constantly started their seventh different unit of offensive line. Now you have another injury. It's just there's not as much continuity as there has been in years past. And so those young guys, they gotta you gotta learn from a Hunter Henry. You gotta learn from the guys that have been there and know how to do it the right way and take it to heart, because if you don't, there's only so much the coaches can do.
Yeah,
And as a player, I fully agree with that.
I think with leadership's such an interesting topic. We could spend 3 podcasts talking about it and interviewing people, but one thing I guess I'll disagree with you is I do think the coach sets the standard no matter what, and it's the player's job to uphold that standard. And I think that's something. Look at Dante. Like we didn't set the standard with Dante. Dante set the standard, and then we upheld the standard and held each other to that standard. And knowing that we were going to police ourselves because, hey, if we can address it before Dante has to address it, that's going to be a lot better. You know what I mean? So,
yep.
I think you do have to have, but like it goes both ways. Like we cared what coaches said and thought, so we were going to try to do whatever we could, and I think you just guys have to do that. And, I don't know, if it's whatever and different things, but, I think you got to be able to coach hard and take that coaching sometimes too, whether you want to hear it or not. And I think that's a big thing. But
all right, so that gets us to what Gerard said after the game. He said we have a soft football team. I know there was some player reaction. Like I don't think the guys disagreed with him. I don't think they took that personally. I think that was something where Gerard came out and said, and that was in relation to the old adage, to be tough, you got to run the football, you got to stop the run, and you got to cover kicks. That's something that I've heard for over 16 years, playing for Bill and other coaches who had learned from him, because that is true. Running the football, stopping the run, that shows your toughness, and then covering kicks. And it's a little different now because of the dynamic kickoff. But you mentioned the punt return; those are things that show the toughness of your team. Not only physical toughness, but mental toughness. And so that's something, and Bill pointed it out last year, top run defense. I find it, it was kind of convenient. He left out the fact that Barmore's hurt, Bentley's out, Duggars. And so 3 guys who are really big, in the run game stopping, but that, people got to step up. And I think, I didn't look at that quote from Gerard and think of the guys that Bill mentioned. I don't think that he thinks that Duggar's not tough. I don't think that Gerard thinks that.
I think, look, if you're a player, it should piss you off, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's good. Like that should piss. It would piss. Like if I was playing, like it pissed me off, and I'm not even playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's like one of those things where like, like going back to being coached hard. Like, all right, like now go out there and prove it.
Right.
Like that. Like go out there and take that. When Dante or Bill or whoever used to get on to me, Josh, like. It was almost like an FU. All right, watch this. And not like an FU, like disrespectful, but like, tell me I can't do something or tell me this and I'll prove you wrong. You know what I mean? And, I think that, I can understand, guys having feelings about it, but he's also the head coach. And, I don't think, that opinion can change, and but again, it goes back to like, we got to change that opinion. All right, you want to do that, and change yourself, change how you're viewed, and all that. So I understand both sides of the fence, and but he's the head coach, and I don't think he told a lie. I think, and it wasn't, and that's the thing too. Like, it's a collective team game. We've talked about that.
Yep.
And so it's like, all right, well, like so and so, but like as a whole, like, yeah, that was not good. They ran the ball, we couldn't run the ball, and they did good on kickoffs or punts and stuff. So I think I understand both sides of that, but like as a player, I'd be taking that now and being like, all right, watch this, watch what I'm about to go do. And
Sure.
I think that's what you have to approach, you have to take. And I think it's gone with anything. Like when my dad would challenge me from little league sports, it was like, again, like I would never tell my dad to go F himself, but like in my mind, I'm sitting there like, all right, F you, watch this. I can prove you wrong, and I can change that. Like, and so you just got to take ownership, man. And I think that's such a big thing. Own everything. Own everything you're doing. Own the good, the bad, the ugly, and take the bad and try to fix it and correct it. And that's all you can do, man. And hopefully we'll try to do that this week.
Yeah, I think this is an opportunity for the team, for Coach Mayo, for everybody to take a page from Bill's book and ignore the noise, because now Bill's on the other side. He's the media. He's technically the noise. And so this is your opportunity to take that lesson that you learned from him, from those guys that have been there, and say, listen, we get it. He's got a personal relationship. He's got opinions about this place because it was here for a long time, and he's the greatest coach of all time. But at this point, Gerard's our coach. He sent a message to the team in a way that maybe Bill wouldn't have, because that would have been internally. He would have came and said those things to us. But Gerard's, it's a new generation. He spoke his mind, after the game. And so now, like you said, it's one of those things like, okay, we'll prove that we're not soft. Let's go back out there. And I don't think, from seeing the response from the guys after they, had heard that Gerard said that, I think that was kind of the sentiment. Like, he's not wrong. We got to do a better job. Because like we talked about last week when we talked about Bill and Tom going their separate ways, at a certain point, the coaches stays on the sideline and the players go out and play, and you have to execute. And when I see, when people want to say, oh, bad play calling, well, I watch the plays and I try to say, well, what's bad about it? I mean, they're getting into good plays. They see 8 men in the box. They change to a pass. Like, the play calling is good, but at a certain point, it's about execution. And you and I have been in those rooms after a loss where it was just poor execution by the players. But there's also times where Bill would say, good players can't overcome bad coaching. So it goes both ways. If you don't prepare the team that well, then the team is set up not to do as well. But there is a certain point where you, as a player, and I've gone out and not executed a lot of times, and it was on me. It wasn't on the play calling. It wasn't on the other players around me. And it being a quarterback, it's magnified even more, because when you make a mistake, it messes everything up for everybody else. But when there's mistakes being made because there's lack of attention to detail or lack of execution, or even for some parts, some of the plays I looked at, lack of effort, then that's on the players, and they have to own that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I just think it goes back to ownership. And sorry, I think, ownership and the players, the coaches, everybody, and I think it's bullshit to blame people. It's bullshit to say, well, I didn't this, I didn't that. Go on like social media, whatever you want. Like, no, like just freaking own your mess ups and move on. And like, there's plenty of times I felt like I've played like crap, and I've had to own that and move on. And I think that's just part of this game, and it's part of learning, and it's if you just stop looking at yourself and look at the whole, and things, and be like, all right, like none of us played well. It's all of our problem, like, and we'll try to fix it. I think that's the only thing you can do.
Yeah. All right. Well, that kind of leads us into the upcoming week. And you say, what's the response? Well, here come the Jets. It's kind of a different scenario than the first time. It was a Thursday night game, quick turnaround. Aaron had a really good game, but they've struggled. Yeah. They've since fired Robert Saleh. Albrecht is now the interim head coach. They trade for Devontae Adams. And through all of that, they went out and lost pretty good to the Steelers this past week. So I'm sure they're hungry. This is kind of a must win for them, because you're getting to week 8. This season is going to get away from you here. They're 2-5. You make this change at the head coach. You make this big trade to get Aaron's guy in Devontae. And, I look at it for them, it's more of a must win in a way than the Patriots, because at this point, 1-6, like you're just looking to try to play good football at this point. The outcome will come when you play good football. But for the Jets, I would say the pressure's on them with the moves that they've made. And now they're coming up here. Obviously, the Patriots, you talk about the response, will be hungry to show that they're not a soft football team. And so it should be an interesting matchup. I think, you learn from, especially defensively, okay, they played a lot of zone against Aaron last time and you picked it apart. Now do you switch? Do you just put Gonzalez on Devontae Adams and say, all right, you've done pretty well when we match you with a lot of these other big name guys. Like, what's the game plan going to be? And then offensively, obviously, now this time you're playing with Drake. And this will be his third game, and I think Drake has played well. I think it's gone kind of how I've expected. There's going to be some really good plays. There's going to be some plays that he's learning in the fire where he could step up in the pocket. He tries to go outside and leave the back of the pocket and it's sacked. I think he's learning that these edge rushers, that when they come up the field, you got to step up. And I think the pass protection as a unit has been good. I think some guys have been beaten individually, but I think there's a lot of times where I'm watching the game and I'm like, all right, he's got more time than I expected. And I think he's going to feel that. And, it'll be a challenge, a good challenge for him. I think that, obviously people are excited. He's made some big plays with his arms. I do think, there's an element that they could add and maybe add some RPOs, add some zone reads, use his athleticism in the run game, because as we talked about before, now that you've made this shift to kind of a shotgun predominant, more, get Drake in the gun, you can add some of these zone reads, some of these RPOs, and add to that run game.
Yeah, I think it'll be a big challenge. And, obviously, I think the Jets are probably looking at the game and they've got 2 really good backs. So, they're probably, thinking that's going to be a big part. So that's going to be a big challenge to answer. Like we said, like teams is such a copycat league, and you get beat one thing one week, like you're going to see that until you stop it. You know what I mean? Yep. And we've talked about that, whether that's offensively, defensively, whatever. So, the Jets probably looking at that and, have their thoughts on how they want to attack it. So it'll be a big challenge for our defense. And I think to answer that would be huge, because, I think if Aaron's able to play on time and certain down and distances and things like that, that's going to be a big challenge. And obviously defensively, like this is a really good defensive football team, and they have been for the last, call it 3-4 years. So, it'll be a big challenge up front. And, obviously we didn't do anything good enough the first time. Didn't prepare well or anything like that. And, it was a short week. So, hopefully this week, guys can take full advantage of all the time they've had and we can, have the best plan we can have with a full week of preparation and guys getting live looks at practice and different things like that. So, it'll obviously be a big challenge because they are such a good football team, and especially defensively, they're star power all over that roster. So, yep. And all that stuff's good and all, but obviously that's not the end all be all. Like, they're 2-5 and they have all the star power they could want. And, so it obviously that stuff doesn't matter, and it's just all comes down to execution and being a team. Yep.
All right, so that kind of gets us set for Patriots coverage. I know, Danny, you got to take over here with a few of your segments that you have for us. So let's have it. You're muted, Danny. Danny,
you're late. You're muted.
You're late, and now
I'm playing.
Don't tell me you didn't unmute your microphone.
Sweating.
What did you, a rough night last night? Were you up watching the Chargers game?
I was up watching the Chargers game. I was up watching all the football. I apologize. Accountability, it's on me. I will be better.
I hope you learned.
Dude,
we just over here.
I will be better.
Minutes talking about that. So
head over to Press Cafe, get you a double cappuccino, something, because you got to wake the fuck up.
I know. DA's battling right now. He's standing up during the podcast because his shoulder's all messed up. So I got to be better. I'll learn from my leaders. All right. Well, yeah, let's throw it back to your playing days, Hoya. Your first ever touchdown in the NFL, 2009, October, against the Titans. It was at Foxborough, right? And it was just
Foxborough.
Absolute
throwback jerseys too, right?
Throwback jerseys, the true throwbacks, 50th anniversary, gray face mask, red jerseys. It was one of those. It was a cool experience because we expect bad weather here in Foxborough, but it was like October, what?
I was about to say it was like a
15th?
pop-up storm, right?
I think it was October 19th.
19th. So, okay, you might expect some rain, maybe a chill.
Last week it's 75 degrees here today.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I saw this pop up the other day. They talked about it because not only did I score my first touchdown, but Tom Brady threw 5 touchdowns in one quarter, 6 in the whole game. We had their number, and I'll never forget in warmups. It hadn't started snowing yet. It was kind of like this slush, kind of like one of those dreary October New England days. But you could feel the temperature as we were warming up. You could just feel it getting colder and colder.
Was it a 1 o'clock game? Or was it 4?
I think it might have been a 4. I think it was a 4 o'clock game because it was dark.
Yeah, so
and it had to be a 4 o'clock game. But I'll never forget, as quarterbacks, and I'm sure you as a center, David, because you got to snap the ball, you'd rather play in snow than rain, especially a cold rain, because the ball's harder to get a snap. It's harder to hold. Okay, great. Good for you.
Thank you.
But as a quarterback, you'd rather play in the snow. And I always remember Tom saying, like, he preferred the snow because, one, the ball got a little bit of extra tackiness from the moisture in there, but it didn't get wet because the snow was dry. And so we're kind of warming up, and he's like, oh, man, it's going to be a shitty weather day. Like, but then you could see, like, as we were heading in after warmups, it started to kind of get, like, flaky instead of being just rain. And he's like, oh, maybe it's going to snow. Which I'm like, it's October, it's not going to snow. And we come out, it's like a full blizzard. And he was screaming. He's like, oh yeah, let's go. It's a beautiful day to throw the ball. Sure enough, 6 touchdowns later. And we had their number. I mean, I'll never forget, like, we'd be like, all right, how about the flea flicker here? All right, sure, why not? The flea flicker to Randy Moss. And then he's throwing a screen to Kevin Falk. And it was like, literally one of those days where everything just went right. And as I'm sitting there my rookie year, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to play in the NFL today. Like we're winning so bad. Like I'm going to get a chance to play. And it was cool because it was, like you said, it was the throwback uniforms. It was kind of like that welcome to the NFL moment. And, I'm getting to play in a blowout win, but
doesn't matter.
I'm getting in there. Yeah, it doesn't matter. And it's your first time playing. And I remember I completed a pass to Algie Crumpler, which was like, I was like, oh my God, I just threw a pass to a guy that's been playing since I was like in grade school.
Algie's,
I mean, this is crazy.
For Atlanta when my uncle was there.
That's right. Yeah. So, it was one of those experiences. And then we get down to the goal line and Bill O'Brien comes in my helmet. He's like, just sneak it. Go ahead, get your first touchdown. So we get up there. And this is my first opportunity to ever celebrate a touchdown. Because, college, you got to hand the ball to the official.
Not anymore, though.
So
they get a lot of celebrating now.
Oh, yeah. Now in college, I think it's like anything goes. But back when I was playing, it was like if you did anything, if you celebrated too much with your teammates, you got a penalty. So I quarterback sneak it. I get in the end zone. The field's covered in snow. And I wanted to do a big spike. That was kind of like when I was a kid growing up, everybody, that was like the thing. Like you just spike the ball. This is before Gronk. But I wanted to spike the ball, and I go to spike the ball, and one of my college teammates who played for the Titans, Kevin Vickerson, as I'm leaning back to spike the ball, he slaps the ball out of my hands. So I don't get to spike the ball. I'm like, I got to do something. And the signature Randy Moss, he gave this signal because he was splitting the defense. And that's how we got the signal for Hoss, because Randy would always do this and kind of rhymed with Moss, and he ran the seam in that route. And so that's where the signal came. And I was like, screw it, I'm doing the Randy Moss to celebrate. And so there's this classic iconic picture. I sent it to Danny, and they posted it in their throwback, the Instagram. And it was me. And you know how after the victories, they would put up pictures in the halls down at Gillette, right, of the game. So this is kind of a tradition. If we win the game, you come in on Wednesday and there's pictures from everybody from throughout the game. And right by the meal room was that picture of me doing the celebration. So it was one of those memories. I still have the football, which is pretty cool because it was a special football for that game because it was the AFL 50th anniversary. So it even says that on there. The refs had the orange and white creamsicle shirts on. And so one of those fond memories, and I think it made it even better in my mind because it was kind of this whimsical, beautiful snowfall game, and we smoked them, and I got my first touchdown. But it was pretty cool to see the picture of that, 16 years later.
Yeah, I mean, I think being in the South, and I know you're from Michigan, and you might have played a snow game.
I'm from Ohio. Jeez,
well, you went to Michigan State. Whatever, dude.
I know for you being in the South, you think we're all the same up there, but
that's
a big difference.
Just like you guys think we're all the same. It don't matter. It's all right. But did you ever play in a snow game in high school or college?
Oh yeah.
See, I never
high school.
I never did, obviously. So
see, as a kid, when you were growing up, when it snowed, that was when everybody got together to go play football in the backyard because you could tackle each other and it wasn't going to hurt. And so you'd be out there until you couldn't feel your fingers anymore. And that was like, to me, growing up in Cleveland, because we would get a lot of lake effect snow. A lot of the Browns games I would go to as a kid there'd be snow. And like I said, when you were a kid, you wake up, snow day, which I know you probably didn't have many of those. That's when you called the boys up. You're like, hey, let's go. We're going to play football. And you'd play in the backyard in the snow. And those were the days it'd be full tackle, because you knew that if you tackled someone in the snow, it was just kind of falling in a snowdrift. It was awesome.
Yeah, there's something about NFL football and snow, and I think it's so nostalgic. So, I can't imagine your first snap being in a freaking blizzard. And,
it was awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't want to age you, Hoy, but I was 13 watching that, just fist pumping, and I vividly remember. So proud.
I love it. Love it.
Aren't you like
Thanks for making me feel older?
What'd you say?
39.
Oh, okay.
Easy now.
All right, let's get into some quick snaps. This week, I'm going to hammer you both you guys, and I want both answers. DA, why don't you go answers first? Hoy, you go second, but we're going both of you. All right. So, first one here. What's your death row meal? Your last meal ever?
I'm going to have some fried okra, probably some country fried steak and gravy with mashed potatoes, some cornbread probably, and some like field peas. That would probably be
no dessert.
My dessert. I don't know, like probably like either like an Oreo milkshake or like a cookie sundae.
I like the Oreo milkshake option.
Hoy, your pick.
All right, I'm gonna go a steak from Peter Luger's, the tuna tartare from Zuma here in Boston. It's one of the. I mean, when I get that, it's like I could just eat that all day. And then for sides, I'm probably gonna go with a mac and cheese. Not any specific place, but I'm thinking of those two places because I just recently, for my birthday, we went down to New York, went to Peter Luger. It's a legendary place, and the steak is incredible. They put the sizzling butter over it, and then I just went to Zuma recently and had that, and I can my mouth is salivating just thinking about it. But mac and cheese, and then I'd have to throw in some of my Oma, my German grandma's, some of her German dishes. She would make this cucumber salad I made it for you, David, when you came over that one time. It's like very simple, but every kind of holiday she would bring that. Some of her braised red cabbage. And then for dessert, I'm probably going to go either pumpkin pie, and I know that's kind of a seasonal thing, but I've always, since I was a little kid, and right around this time of the year, I always get excited for the pumpkin pie, and maybe just a classic ice cream sundae with hot fudge, some peanuts, and that'd be it. And I would definitely have to have an old fashioned one last time.
I like that. You're making me hungry. All right, next one: beach or mountain getaway?
This is a tough one because as I've gotten older, living here in the Northeast and being able to go to Vermont, and I've gone to done some trips to Colorado, I've done some trips to Montana. Those are great, but I don't think there's anything better than laying by a beautiful beach down in the Caribbean with a nice cocktail and just like the water. I mean, I had a place that we used to go. It was a pretty good, well-kept secret in St. John in the U.S. Virgin Islands, a place called Keneal Bay. And, the hot season is usually the spring, but because of our football schedule, we could only really go in that late June, early July timeframe. And so we would go and it would be, be super hot. It was kind of downtime. So going there, and there was a beach on that resort called Turtle Bay, and going there, and you'd go and you would almost have the place to yourself. And it was one of just those paradise moments. And to me, unfortunately with the hurricane back in 2017, it kind of just got wiped off. I mean, the place got destroyed and they've had a hard time bringing it back. But, that's one of my favorite places that I've ever been. So I think I'm going to go with beach.
Yeah, you think mountain or beach? I'm so out on the mountains. Just every time I go there, it seems like something bad happens to me. So I'm a beach, sea-dwelling creature all day, every day.
All right, like that. Last one here. What superpower would you want? Like flying, time travel, super strength. DA, you already got that. Speed. Hoyer, you already got that. What superpower would you guys want?
I think I would want flying. That would be cool, just to be like, screw it. Like, and I'm sure if you can fly with other people, like hold them. I don't know.
Time travel is superpower.
I think it's a superpower.
I was kind of thinking more. Have you ever seen that movie? I think it's called Jumper. where
Yeah.
like they have like the ability to like if you visualize a place and you can go there. I think that would be pretty cool. Not have to try like literally think about where you want to go, close your eyes, visualize it, and I think as long as you have a picture of it, you can go anywhere in the world. I think that's pretty cool.
I agree with that. All right, well, that wraps up Quick Snaps in the first segment here. But Hoyer, your former teammate, is coming on the show as our guest this week. So why don't you give us a little intro on Joe Thomas?
Yeah, really excited to have this guy on. I was sitting there watching the game the other day, and I kind of forgot Joe was even doing any of the media stuff anymore. I know, right out of playing, he was doing some of the stuff, especially Thursday night games. I got to see him on a few of those. Would walk over on the stage and say hello. And this past year, actually, moved his entire family to Germany in Munich and helped coach a German football team there, the Munich Ravens. There's this whole league that's set up over there. I'm actually trying to get involved right now with the Frankfurt Galaxy, one of the teams from the old NFL Europe, and they have a whole league. It's called European League of Football, so ELF, ELF. And Joe moved his whole family, helped coach there this year, and so I kind of, we texted back and forth, and I didn't realize he was still doing the media thing, but I thought, what better week to have him come on and kind of share his story, but also, after calling the Patriots game, doing the research, getting ready for those guys, and have him on. Obviously, a tremendous player, 10 years, 10 Pro Bowls, never missed a snap until he had a tricep injury and recently inducted to the Hall of Fame. And I think it's good to get his perspective. I know David has an interesting question he wants to ask him about an old tweet that he put out.
Obviously, I have a lot of respect for him, and I'm super excited.
So we'll get to that.
It's a guy that, when I came into the league, not that I modeled myself after him. He was a left tackle and different things, but just his consistency and obviously one of the true greats of this game. So, I'm excited to talk to him, and this question's been burning me for about 6 years. So I'm excited to get to ask him that and put him on the spot a little bit.
Yeah, he'll do great. He's one of my favorite teammates I ever play with. And you talk about like living in the NFL life. It was always nice because his wife and my wife were friends. It was one of those things, like, David, you kind of come along people across your journey that are in the same life stage. They have kids at the same age. And there's a pretty cute picture of my son and his daughter holding hands after a training camp practice. And we have that still. And, it's one of those things that is, those are the relationships that make it worth it. And obviously I always felt safe when he was playing left tackle for me. And I'll bring it up to him. We've talked about it before, but he always used to say, once your back foot hits 11 yards, you're on your own. But anything besides that, I got you. And so it was always good to have him there and know that he had your blind side protected. And now we can get to talk to him about his post NFL career and his Hall of Fame induction. So a lot of good topics coming your way. Welcome back to the Quick Snap Podcast. I'm here with a guy I'm really excited to introduce to you, NFL Hall of Famer, a former left tackle of mine for 2 years when I played in Cleveland, Joe Thomas.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. It's great to see your shining face again, Brian.
You mean a shining head?
A little while.
Hey, Joe's copied my look.
There we
go.
Look.
All right.
Bald respects bald, and we know that bald is the most beautiful. So that's why I've always loved Brian. Love hanging out with him because then I don't get too much hair envy.
That's right. Well, when we played together, you still had hair, so clearly you saw something in my look that you thought maybe down the road I'm going to try it out. And I turned on the game the other day and I saw you on there, and it looks great on you. So it's great to have you here. And I thought, what better week to have you on? Because this is kind of a New England podcast, but we're also kind of expanding to the entire NFL. But to have you on after you just called the Patriots game over there in London, if you don't mind just talking about your experience. You mentioned you took your children with you, had some fun across the pond, but also got a chance to call a Patriots game and just your thoughts on the game in general.
Yeah, it's fun. Anytime you get a chance to be in the booth, it's always a joy. There's only so many seats like that in the world. And so to feel the honor of being able to be up there and have few million people sort of in your living room listening to what you have to say and how you see the game of football, it's a blast. And when you can bring your kids along with, and I brought my wife and they got to do fun London things while I was in the hotel studying and doing my work, it was really an awesome experience, especially because as a player, I never got to play in London, never got to experience that international flavor, the way that the English fans really just embrace the NFL game as a whole, was cool. And the game, for being 2 1-5 teams, actually was pretty entertaining. It started out really good, and there was some runs in the second half. It was a lot of fun watching Drake May and seeing him come right out of the gates, playing really good football, moving the ball down the field. And so I think overall I was really, really happy with that whole London experience and the game between Jacksonville and New England.
Yeah, it was great because I got to sit down and, now I'm kind of on the same side as you, my first year not playing. And I sat down and obviously we've talked, throughout the last year because of your trip over to Germany, which we'll get to later. But I kind of forgot that you were still calling games. So it was a nice surprise for me on a Sunday morning. I had my cup of coffee. I'm sitting there watching the game and to see a familiar face. And who better to have? And obviously we're here with David, who unfortunately just had surgery this weekend on his shoulder, so he couldn't be there to play in the game. But a Hall of Fame lineman, and much has been made about the Patriots line. And I heard you mention it right off the get-go. 7th different offensive starting lineup on the offensive line. But I thought they did a pretty good job, especially with the injuries and some new guys have only been there for a few weeks. I mean, from your commentating perspective, what were your thoughts?
I was impressed with the way this version of the Patriots offensive line played. Early on in the game, they were giving Drake tons of time. And even as the game wore on, there was no obvious huge mistakes where there was communication problems and they couldn't get the protection lined up the way they wanted. There wasn't free rushers. And that was one of the things I think we were looking for going into the game, because we expected Jacksonville to heat up the rookie, right? That's what you do to rookies. You try to confuse them. You show them one thing pre-snap, give them something after the snap. You show blitz, you drop, you show that you're going to be covered, and then you bring guys. And they did a really good job picking that up. They gave Drake plenty of time. There was a few times that nobody was available down the field, so Drake was able to step up. There were some lanes in the B gap to be able to get out and extend plays. So I think this is probably the iteration of the Patriots offensive line that you're going to see for a while, because I think overall they did a really good job blocking, especially because they've been much maligned most of the season.
Well, that's nice to hear you say a nice thing about the Pats O-line, because there's a something that, and it's funny how the world works, because you talked about something in 2019 after we won the Super Bowl in 18, and I think I have it here.
You got to dust off the Bible there.
I got it. All right.
5
well,
years
and
old.
look, I was undrafted, Joe, and I'm not saying I'm bitter, but that always stays in the back of your mind. And obviously, I still have so much respect for you, but you said this, and it kind of got under my skin. I probably was also, that was the year I had blood clots and I wasn't playing, so I probably still was dealing with some personal stuff. But let's just dive into this here. So someone tweeted at you about the Chiefs O-line. You said that's 90% of it, and 10% is the performance of your O-line. One of the best performing O-lines in the NFL over the last 5 years is the Patriots, and I'm not sure if any of those guys could start on another team in the NFL, but they play really well together within their scheme, and their quarterback ties it all together by making quick decisions and being where he's supposed to be in the pocket. Now, you obviously said some good things, but I only took the bad things from that. And to have this opportunity,
it was the compliment sandwich.
Yeah, that's right. To have this opportunity now, just wanted to hear, and I do understand what you're saying, and I know you're probably bitter that you had to play with Brian and I got to play with Tom, but
man, we got to the bottom of this real fast.
I thought, I think there's some truth in there, but also, I think, it was an interesting take because, I've played 10 years now. Shaq's played 10 years. He's been with 3 different teams. Joe Tooney's turned out to be one of the best guards in the NFL. And that year, Trent Brown, left to sign the biggest contract as a tackle. So, and he went on to have a couple of good years in Oakland. But, I do think there is something that you are saying, and that is so true. Knowing that your quarterback is going to hit his back foot, know where he wants to go with the ball, and deliver that ball is a huge thing. And I think, we talked about a lot on this podcast and just about football and how it's the greatest team game. And, you look at Sunday and let's say you give up a strip sack. Well, if the quarterback's sitting at 13 yards, what are you supposed to do? And so there.
Well, Joe, do you remember, not to cut you off, you remember what you used to tell me when I played for you? If my back foot hit 11, I was on my own. But if I was under 10, I got you. And that held true for all the games we played together. And what made you so great was I knew that was, and to David's point, I learned a lot of my pocket presence from Tom, and he did a tremendous job of helping his offensive line out. Sorry, David.
So, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And but none of us would start for another team. That's a little cold, Joe. That's a little cold. When 4 of the 5
cold.
guys in one of our backups now has been the Cincinnati Bengals center Ted Karras for the last 3 years. So, do you want to retract some of that now? This is your opportunity to make it right.
What I would like to say was that was the bait, the cheese that I threw out there because I wanted to be on your podcast.
Yeah,
it took 5 years for you guys to finally take the bait to be able to bring me on and be able to give me an opportunity to say how great you guys are individually now. And I think the point that you just made that I love, though, and which impressed me the most probably about the Patriots being this past weekend, watching them, different O-line combinations in every game, but they got it right. And communication and playing together is so much more about how good you're going to be as an offensive line than the individual pieces that you put out there, because you have to work together with each other, but also with that quarterback. Because like Brian said, hey, if he's at 11, 12 yards or even at 9, but he's supposed to be at 7, we don't have eyes in the back of our head. So our ability to trust what they're going to do and where they're going to be is so much about how we're blocking and how we handle the rushers across from us. I love the Patriots line from 2007 when it was Matt Light and Logan Mankins, and I can't remember all the guys, but they were all in the Pro Bowl, right? And I loved it because everybody was short setting. Everybody knew that as long as I don't get beat to the inside, and because I'm short setting, I'm probably not going to get run over. If I make him run wide and I make him run outside, that's going to give Tom the pocket that he needs and the time that he needs to be able to step up. And really, as long as we're on the right rushers, there's nobody who's going to be able to get home. No, because they can run around all they want, but they're just giving Tom the throwing lanes that he needs. And for an offensive line, that is a great comfort to have that trust between each other, but also the unit and the quarterback.
It is, and I think to be able to get the chance to talk to you about O-line play is awesome for me. But, I think too, like something we always going back to the team stuff, like even when you're running stunts, like it's never just one guy that's going to pick up a stunt, right? Like if you set like an asshole at left tackle, there's not much the guard could do, even if he's a can of kick-ass sometimes, like you have to set in congregation with each other. It's just like if you try to set wide and they run an ET and you have a horrible set, like there's not much you're going to be able to provide that guard from getting his ear blown out. So, I do think what you said about having 5 guys, and that's something I thought we always did a really good job of, is having 5 guys that work well together. And you don't have to be, the most talented guys, but if you have 5 that work well together, that's a lot better than maybe having 2 great ones versus, but you've played with a lot of good O linemen. I mean, Batonio, Mack, that was something I always watched Cleveland. They always had a really good, obviously you being the focal point of that in your career. But, just talk a little bit about that, like some of those guys you played with, who have gone on, Joel's still playing, but, Mac was such a great player. And I had as a center, a lot of respect for him, watching him, how he played. And, so just talk to a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. The line that I played with that was probably the best line during my 11 years was me, Joe Batonio left guard, Alex Mack was the center, right guard was John Greco, right tackle was Mitchell Schwartz.
I always forget Schwartz was starting.
Yeah, that's who I was playing
Schwartz,
for.
He made like 2 All-Pros at right tackle when he went to Kansas City. But it's interesting, fans, they never really appreciate good offensive line play until it's bad. Gaining a lot of yards rushing. Yeah, until it's bad. Or you have a quarterback that's playing great and that's, throwing for a billion touchdowns. And when we were there, that was our O-line. And we knew we were good, but nobody else did. And the fan base and even the media were like trying to get rid of all of us, like all the time. Like obviously, probably not me as much because I had some Pro Bowls under my belt, but everybody else on that O-line stunk and we needed to get rid of him. And I felt bad for Mitch because he was the one that always seemed to get the brunt of it. It was like, we got to get rid of Schwartz and stuff. But they didn't understand, like, we're doing the right things. We're blocking for a spot. We're working together in unison, and then we got somebody like Hoyer's buddy Manziel back there doing his own thing, independent operator. And my guy got a sack, but it wasn't my fault. But it's hard for me to go on
you can't say
and be
that.
Like,
Dante,
well, I did my job. I know you guys think it was my sack, but the quarterback screwed it up. So point the finger at him. And so I think it's one of those positions.
Dante always said you never want to be an independent contractor.
No. Can't do it.
The one great thing about offensive line in all of football, it's the one true unit, right? Like the D-line, yeah, they're in there, but they're kind of rotating in and out. But the offensive line, they're in there every single play, barring injury, right? And they have to, as Dante, I would tell these guys in New England, you got to see it through the same set of eyes. And you just mentioned our offensive line from when we played together in 2014. And that kind of leads me to this point. We're sitting here talking to David, who just had surgery. If you remember back to that season, we had it rolling. And then we lost Alex Mack, who was really in that West Coast system. The center is the glue. He makes all the calls. He spreads everything through the line. And so we had a great offensive line. But when we lost Alex, we kind of started to lose the ability to be as dominant in the run game as we were. And as you remember, we were so run game heavy, and then the play action and the boots off of that, and we started to falter a little bit. But we're sitting here talking to David, and we've seen, losing not only just his leadership and expertise at center, but we watched the offensive line, and yeah, they're getting better, but I know that they'd love to have David out there. But similar scenario that you and I went through in 2014, when you lose that center, it's one of the, obviously as a quarterback, I always think of my left tackle because I'm right-handed, and my center, because those are the two guys that are going to do the best job protecting me and getting the line right.
Yeah, and when you have a center like Alex Mack who makes all those Pro Bowls, like, you can trust that he's going to get the protection scheme figured out. Like, he's going to see the defense. He knows where the pressure's coming from, and we're going to put our 5 on the 5 we're supposed to be on. Mm-hmm. Now, if they bring 6, that's up to the running back or the quarterback or more. Obviously, you have to be on the same page there. But just having that trust where you can kind of walk to the line of scrimmage and already cross that off your process, knowing, okay, protection's covered. Now I can start thinking about, all right, where are my safeties? What's the coverage? What are the matchups I like? And so it just speeds up your process as a quarterback when you're at the line of scrimmage and you've got that guy in the middle. And for us in that season that we had, like, the big loss with Alex, we moved Greco over to center, and he was a good center, but he wasn't able to reach the nose guard the way Alex was. And when you're running those outside zones, and they try to widen the nose to take away your outside zone, because if you can't reach the nose, you're going to force a quick cutback from the running back. So we kind of lost some of that ability, which really hurt our run game. And without being able to run outside zone, it's hard to run some of your boots and some of your play actions off of that, which we really lived on. So it's interesting how everything really works together, and that center is so important, especially in that West Coast Shanahan scheme. And that's why Kyle brought Alex with him to Atlanta, and then when he went to the 49ers, he brought him with him again.
That's right. Yeah, the one thing that I thought was great about you, Joe, was, we've already talked about it, over 20 different quarterbacks, how many different offensive coordinators you had, and you did 10 years, 10 Pro Bowl seasons, all of these 10,363 consecutive snaps. You didn't have the luxury of coming back into consecutive years and being like, all right, I know who the coordinator is going to be. I know who the quarterback's going to be. But you were the thing that I was always impressed. And I remember the notes you took. I remember looking over and you take these notes, and here you are, an all-pro player, Pro Bowl player, leader of the offense. And I wish more guys would have just followed in your footsteps, because if you watch a guy and your best player on your team is leading that by that example, and we had a lot of guys who just, they didn't take advantage of that. But I remember appreciating that so much. But let's just talk about your journey, because you're infamously, on draft day, you were out fishing. I know you and David would have gotten along great, because I see the fish back there. I see a little bit of a turkey feathers back there.
You need
David,
to come kill a Georgia turkey, hardest turkey to kill.
David's got his farm down in Georgia. We'll link you guys up. But you go from that, you're drafted, you're out on the boat fishing, enjoying, and then you kind of just were this lunch pail guy for a city that I grew up in, and then got to play in Cleveland. You were the Cleveland Brown for all those years. Talk about, just what it was like having to, year in, year out, you're not really sure what it's going to be, who the coach is going to be, who the quarterback's going to be, but you knew that I'm going to go do my job the best of my ability, and then, make it all these consecutive snaps until you were injured. But, just that mentality and what it meant to you.
Yeah, my rookie year, we had Romeo Cornell as our head coach for 2 years, then Mangini for 2 years, and obviously they both worked for Bill Belichick. And so the themes, the values that they were trying to teach were the same as Bill's, about do your job, focus on what you can control. And I really took that to heart. And I think it's weird to say, but playing on all those bad teams during my career, it actually made me a better player in the long run, because I think the tendency for a lot of guys is, hey, we're winning, I must be doing enough, right? But when you're not winning, everybody's booty hole is tight. Everybody's trying to search and scratch and find every little detail, every little thing that they can do that's a little bit better to try to put you over the top and get a win. And on the O-line, David, you know this, like, the last thing we want is to be the center of attention for losing. Like, you stress day in and day out that you're going to make one mistake that's going to cause a loss, or in our situation, like a game that we could have won that we don't usually win a lot of games, but we could have won that. But you screwed up one thing, and then that's the only thing that you can think about. So I think it always kept the pressure on me being on those teams that weren't very good. And so I just stressed out about my process. I stressed out about trying to control everything I could do to be as perfect as possible, knowing that I never wanted to be the reason that we lost a game, especially when there were so few games that we were actually in down the stretch. And to know that I was at least doing everything I possibly could, controlling everything I possibly could to be the best version of myself for our team to maybe be able to get a win.
That's funny you say that, because I think it's so funny about like contrasting O-line versus D-line play, right? You could kick a guy's ass all game, score 34 points, dominate this guy. And maybe it's a 2-minute drive or something at the end of the game where you guys got to try to go score, and you've kicked this guy's ass all game and he gets a sack. And now the 60 other great plays you had go out the window for one bad one, and that's the one they focus on costing the game. And, we've all been there at some point in our career. And it's funny because I've always thought that, like, you if you're an O lineman, you give up a sack a game, you're getting fired. And you get a sack a game as a D lineman, you're going to be a Hall of Famer, and it's so funny how that works. But, one thing I think that I wanted to ask you about, just because I think it's such a cool thing, and Bill always had a great reverence for the Hall of Fame, and were you on that trip when we went out there?
Yep. We went on the way. It was on the way to Detroit, right?
Yeah, we were going to Detroit for the preseason, and we stopped at the Hall of Fame. And, for someone that loves football and grew up around the game, like, it was such a cool experience for me just to see, the hall and everything, and get kind of behind the scenes of it. And I can remember when guys, would go in, Bill would usually leave and go to the Hall of Fame thing. And, it was just cool to kind of see and watch. So I just wanted to ask you kind of about your experience with that, and the emotions, the all of it, the whole shebang of, your induction.
Yeah, obviously one of the most emotional and special times of my entire life, certainly in my sporting career. But to me, it was really cool because two things. One, when I retired, my oldest child was 4. My daughter, Logan, who's friends with Brian's oldest son, they were like buddies at training camp. So when I went in, my kids were like 10. My youngest was, I think, 5. When I played, none of them really have any memories of me being a football player. So my whole life, my kids just know me as like dad that's sitting on the couch doing nothing, watching football, occasionally on TV. So it was fun for them to see me as a football player for that week, going into the Hall of Fame, seeing my highlights, seeing the celebration of my career, and making that connection that, oh yeah, Dad did play football at one point. He was a good football player. He had this career before I can remember. But the other part that was really cool is it felt like as a lineman, when you go in, you don't have a lot of highlights. It's not like on the screen they're putting up me sacking the quarterback or catching touchdowns or throwing touchdowns. So for me, it was a celebration of all my teammates. And it was so special to be able to have so many of them come out to the game, come out to the week and the celebration and the induction, so that we could all celebrate together. And we didn't have a chance to celebrate a lot of wins together because we weren't on very good teams and never made the playoffs in 11 seasons. But there was a lot of good players, and there was even more good men. And so for me to be able to go there, to kind of shine the light on some of them, their careers, and celebrate as a group, as a unit, I think was really, really special. And, probably the last time I'll have that feeling of being a member of a team, and to have those emotions that come out when you are part of a team, which is so much of what an offensive lineman attaches our self-worth and our identity to when we're playing the game as an offensive lineman.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I remember, obviously, I was still playing. I got when you go in the Hall of Fame, the Browns are sending out, hey, please come to this. And I would have loved to make it, but I was still playing at that point, which just boggles my mind that you were my left tackle and you were getting inducted in the Hall of Fame while I was still playing. But I remember seeing the photos and the videos of you and Annie and your kids. And there's this one infamous shot of your son kind of giving the thumbs down to the Steelers fan on the float, and clearly you taught him well. But how cool! I'm getting chills just thinking about it. How cool that was, and how proud they were of you. You could see it in the videos and the photos, and how cool it is for you to be able to share that with them while you're still young and they can understand it. And clearly your son understands the rivalry of Cleveland and Pittsburgh, because it's a great photo. We'll see if Danny can find it and throw it on there. But I remember seeing that and being like, how cool is that? And, just like you said, the emotions. And it's funny you talk about, that one last time of celebrating, getting those people together. And we, it wasn't the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but Tom Brady was inducted here into the Patriots Hall of Fame last year, and they went all out. I mean, Jay-Z was here, Kenny Chesney, the man. I mean, it was a ordeal. But for us as players, you talk about celebrating the guys that you play with. I mean, Joe, his center that he played with when he was a rookie is almost like 60 years old. So we had guys who were like almost 60, and then we had the guys who had just been here with him playing here in New England in 2019 who were, Damian Harris is like 24 or 25 years old. So it was pretty cool to see faces. I remember we saw Dan Connolly. Did you play with Dan, David?
I think he retired the spring I got here.
Okay, so Dan Connolly, he's just like you, Joe. He showed up. I was like, that face looks familiar, but he must have lost like 60 pounds, and he was in such good shape. He goes, yeah, it's me, it's Dan Connolly. But like guys you didn't get to see for a long time. And I think we always talk on this podcast, what makes playing in the NFL so special is the camaraderie. And like for you and I, we may not see each other for a long time, but we were out in Vegas last year, and I hear this voice behind me at the Adele concert. And I look back, and it was you and your wife, Annie, and we thought, what a small world, but how great it was to see you guys and catch up, because in our short time there in Cleveland, you guys were such good friends to us, and we talking to David, like you find people who are in that same life cycle as you, kids the same age, you kind of understand what people are going through, and obviously we appreciated, our time with you guys there. I want to shift now. We talked about the Hall of Fame, your post-NFL career. Obviously, you've done some media, but a really cool thing that I knew you did, and you tried to coax me in with you, was this past year you moved your family over to Munich in Germany and helped coach the Munich Ravens, a team in the European League of Football. And how cool of a experience was that for you, for your family, get to experience, the sport we love in a country that's they're trying to build it up. Obviously NFL games being played there now, but just, let fill us in on that decision to go do that and what it meant to you.
So my wife lived outside of London as a kid for a year, and when we were dating, she talked glowingly about the memories that they made, and they were only there for a year, but we talked even before we had kids about how cool would it be to just spend a year abroad with the family doing whatever. We didn't even have any idea what it would be. And then I went to the NFL Munich game 3 years ago and happened to do a podcast with the commissioner of the league, Patrick Asume, and mentioned to him kind of off the cuff, like, hey, if there's ever an opportunity, I would love to come over here and bring my family. So he connected me with the Munich Ravens, because he was like, hey, what team do you want to coach? And I was like,
yeah,
all right,
good city.
Now we're
pick.
talking. Let's go. I was like, Munich,
Yeah.
because beautiful city, obviously, but it's also right central in the middle of Europe, so you can kind of get everywhere. Because part of the experience for us was coaching, bringing our kids and living abroad, but being able to travel too when we had time off. And so Munich was just a perfect blend of all the things we were looking for. And for me, I wanted to be able to coach, because I love coaching. I love teaching. It's such a passion that I have. But coaching at the college or the NFL level, you really have to kind of say goodbye and say no to all those other things that you like in life, because you have to be so committed every minute of your day, 365 days per year, to that coaching, to those players. And so the opportunity to go coach in Europe, even though it is professional, these guys aren't getting paid enough to do that alone. So they work during the day. So you do have a lot more free time as a coach versus what you would get in college or the NFL over here. So it was such a perfect blend of living abroad with my family, having time to travel, but still being able to coach adults, professionals that are doing what they love, playing all throughout Europe, playing a bunch of teams in Germany. We played in our division was Milan, Barcelona, Innsbruck, Austria. We played Prague. So like you get to travel all these cool places, but still you get to kind of scratch that itch of football that I really want to do. But in the States, you just don't have a lot of opportunities to kind of do it on a part-time basis and still be able to spend that time with your family, spend that time getting out hunting and fishing, spend the time on my farm, raising my cattle, like doing whatever I like to do that I'd been waiting 11 years till I was done with my NFL career to be able to do. So it was an incredible experience, Hoyer. I don't know if you get an opportunity ever to go over and do that.
I might.
But I would absolutely take it. I would encourage any players that have the time, that have the ability to go do something like that, to absolutely do it, because it was a life-changing experience, not only for me and giving me the opportunity to coach, but for my kids to be able to live abroad and see a different perspective of the world than they would get growing up and living in Madison, Wisconsin, or Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah, I loved it because your Instagram was so inspiring to me to do it. You know, one weekend you'd be in Italy, and then the next weekend you were in Spain, and it was awesome. And then along the way, oh, by the way, coaching football, which I think as a player, deep down you always have that desire. But as you mentioned, here, if you're going to coach, even if it's the high school level in the United States, it takes a lot of your time. And so, you know, I'm just getting out of, you know, playing. Maybe there's a team who wants to sign me for the last 3 weeks and add to my pension and 401k. I'm still can throw it just in case. But I think down the road, I've actually had some talks with the Frankfurt Galaxy and David Noer over there. So it may be, especially being a dual citizen, something that we try to get done, because you clearly did it and had a lot of fun.
Yeah, and unlike you, I will actually come and visit and help coach when you go over there and do it.
Yes, I like that
because
joke.
I'm a good teammate and good friend.
I wanted to, but it was like I wasn't sure if I was playing. We were moving. Trust me, I wish I could have, because even Lauren would say, she would see Annie and the things she was posting. It was like, maybe we should go over. I'm like, all right, you let me know when, and we'll try to cook it. And then sports, and you know, it's a commitment. I was actually, I mean, to see, you know, your kids were playing rugby over there and just fully, you know, immersed in that culture. It seemed like it was a great thing for all of you.
That did you do any hunting in Germany? They got stag and stuff, right?
I did. So I got to do a lot of cool, fun stuff. I did a ton of hiking. I did a bunch of skiing. I was never like a skier because I gave it up once I got to high school with football, but I think I skied like 17 days over there in 3 or 4 countries. So it was awesome. I mean, we tried to make the most of it and did get a little hunting, and I hunted ibex in Spain, 2 different species of ibex, which was awesome. Being up in the mountains and like experiencing the culture and the tradition of their hunting in the mountains was amazing. And then in Germany, I got to shoot a red stag on the U.S. Army base, Grafenwehr, which is where they train all the Ukrainian soldiers before they go over and fight the Russians. And so like, I was literally getting out of my car with my guide, getting ready to like go hike up into our tree stand, and we were right next to the firing range for the helicopters.
I'm good.
And so I'm listening to live fire helicopters shooting their cannons.
One of those Apaches gets loose. I mean, you know.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the guy like the stag aren't going to be nervous by these like cannons exploding. He's like, no, trust me. They've been hearing it for 100 years here because this has been a training ground forever. And so that was a really amazing, incredible experience. And I'm so happy I got to experience European hunting traditions and culture, because it is completely different than what we do in the States.
Yeah, I don't know if you know Matt Light at all, but he's a big outdoorsman too, and we've kind of connected through that. But he talks about he's gone over to Europe and hunted a lot, and in England and stuff, and it's just like a different world, you know, than call it U.S. hunting. So that's really cool. One thing, you know, to kind of pivot to something that happened this weekend, you know, I'm sure you probably saw Deshaun Watson goes down with an injury, and the fans in Cleveland, you know, end up booing and cheering. Cheering him. And I don't know. I think as a player, that's tough to see, you know, and, you know, I understand, you know, fans have their own grievances and different things, but, you know, I think that's tough when you see a guy go down, no matter what the situation is, and people cheering it's tough to see, you know?
Yeah, it's tough. And, you know, we heard a lot of the Cleveland Browns players after that game kind of talking about how they didn't like that, you know, in various different ways about how it made them feel, and they hated it. And as a player in the locker room, like, you sort of treat the players in the locker room based on how they treat you and how they come to work every day. Mm-hmm. And everybody, once they get in the locker room, they leave their baggage at the door. And that has nothing to do with the interactions that you have with all of your teammates. And so I think for those guys, to see the guy that they've gone through training camps with, they go through, you know, the grind of a season with, they see that the way he's working and trying to do everything he can to be the best quarterback that he can for the team, and he gets hurt, and all those players can put themselves in that position on the field, a guy that's maybe not living up to his contract, that the fans are not happy with at all, but he's in a very weak moment in his own career at that moment, tears his Achilles, he's laying on the field, and the players know him for what he's doing in that locker room. And so the empathy that they have for him in that situation is great. And then to hear the fans that are supposed to be on your side cheering when that person doesn't know what his football career is moving forward, I think it's really hard to be in that situation as a player. It happened to me once in my career. Derek Anderson got hurt in a game. I think it was my second season. He had not been playing very well. The fans wanted to see Brady Quinn. He gets hurt. They cheer him. They start chanting Brady. And it's just such an uncomfortable feel for an athlete to have one of your teammates, no matter what the off the field situation is with him, and to feel that the fans that are supposed to be on your side basically cheering or booing for one of your guys because of an injury. And so it's a tough situation. And it's not to make Deshaun a sympathetic figure.
No.
And obviously he's got off the field issues that are still following him, and the performance on the field has not been there to live up to that big contract that he got. But I think it brings up a bigger point that we as players deal with a lot, and that's that we are humans, and because we are gladiators that wear helmets and pads and we go out and we fight in the Coliseum every Sunday, most fans just see us as football players or as the pawns for their team. And they don't understand that we are actually humans also. And so you get treated like that you're just a gladiator and that you're not a person. And I think you see it on the field when stuff like that happens, when you get booed or when guys get hurt like Deshaun did, and they cheer because they want to see him leave the field and then bring somebody else in. But I think sometimes you get that off the field too. And I know you guys being under the microscope in the fishbowl in New England with all the success that you've had, certainly going around town, everybody knows your face, everybody knows who you are as a football player, but they don't understand that, hey, I have a family. I'm a person. Like, I like to go to dinner and just hang out and be a dad too. And like, as much as you want to give them their time and you want to talk to them and sign autographs and do all those things for them, you're like, yeah, I'm also a dad. And right now I'm trying to be a dad. And like, you coming up to me and just treating me like a person transactionally that can just give you a picture or an autograph that can make your day better in this moment. I would love to do that, but then that means that I have to make a sacrifice and not spend this time that I've already told my kids I'm going to be with them, and I'm not going to be the football player right now. And so it becomes difficult at times, and certainly I think that's why you see a lot of athletes, entertainers and stuff just not going out in the public space, because it's difficult for fans to see them as humans that also have roles at home as fathers, as husbands, that don't always want to have to split their time between family or friends, and fans trying to make sure that you can be that person that they want you to be, to give them the time, but also try to give it to your family.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, growing up in Cleveland and then having played there, it's a passionate fan base. But I think cheering any player that gets hurt, whether you like them or not, is not the right thing to do. And then I thought Jameis Winston, who's over the years actually come out with a lot of wisdom and the ways that he says it, but his post-game response was really good. And I think Myles Garrett was the same way. And, you know, for as much as those fans want to see that team win, I know Deshaun hasn't played well, but to cheer someone who's going through an extremely painful injury, who's not trying to play poorly, I think that was in poor taste. And to hit on, like, you know, when it comes down to it, we are just human beings, and we go home just like everybody else does from their job, and we have responsibilities outside of that job. And you know, for me, playing in Cleveland was a big deal because I grew up there. So everybody who I ran into knew someone who knew someone who knew me, and it made me even more approachable. And for me, my Midwest values, you always want to make sure you don't want anyone to think that you're a dick. And so you would do those things, but you only have so much bandwidth. And you know, I remember times where we would go out and we had some great, you know, dinners together and things like that. And it's always, you know, you want to enjoy your time, but you also want to be, you know, call it complimentary to the fans and kind of give them those things. So it's that fine balance. But I think for any time for someone to cheer a player who's down on the field is in poor taste. So, you know, you know the Cleveland fans better than anyone else. And I know that they're passionate and want the team to win, but just a thing that you don't want to see happen in any player, any team in the league. Well, Joe, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it, having your insight, not only on the Patriots, but your career, all of these things. You gave us great insight. And I will say this, if to get you two together, I'm willing to go on my first hunting trip.
Yeah, baby, now we're talking.
Fishing trip would be a little bit more comfortable for me, but if we have plenty of turkeys here, we have
just
I know there's
3
turkeys
grown
in
men
Wisconsin.
in the woods at night.
I love it.
Quiet.
So we'll see if we can set that up because I know you two would hit it off. Thanks for being here with us. Say hello to your family for me. It's always great to catch up with you.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on. Anytime we can get together, I'll be happy to come back on the podcast. And if it means we get together and hunt, I'm all ears. Let's do it, man.
Love it.
Appreciate it, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for coming, man.
Thanks, guys.
All right, quick snaps around the league. Week 7 in the NFL is wrapped up. We're recording here on Tuesday after Monday Night Football, and it was a good Week 7 for football fans, but one of the best games of the week. And one of the teams you've been talking a lot about, Hoyer, is the Minnesota Vikings. They played the Detroit Lions. It was 31-29. Detroit won on a last-second field goal. On the road, it was a great game. Jared Goff, third straight game with 140-plus passer rating. That is the 4th NFL quarterback in NFL history to do that in 3 straight games. But talk to me about that Lions-Vikings game.
Yeah, it was awesome. I think those are one of those games. Let's just say your team's not playing. Okay, you're the Patriots fan, and the game's over already. You're going to sit down and you just love watching football. Like that's the game that you wanted to tune into because here are the Vikings who've come in hot out the gate. We've talked about them every single week, and here are the Lions who had a great run last year and for a few plays away from going to the Super Bowl and kind of picked up where they left off. And Goff has just been incredible. I think this shows you. Sometimes a quarterback, a fresh start, both of these guys, really, when you look at it. Obviously, Goff went to a Super Bowl with the Rams, and they decided to move on from him, which seems like it's worked out for both teams. The Rams win a Super Bowl with Stafford. Here's Goff, who's totally resurrected his career, is probably playing better, if not better, than any quarterback in the league. And this kind of just shows you, like, sometimes you need those changes in scenery. You need to be around different people. And I think a big part of it, too, is his offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, who was up for a few head coaching jobs, decides to stay. And you can just see how in unison those two are and how comfortable Goff feels in that system. A while back, Goff used to be one of the, I don't want to say worst quarterbacks, but he struggled when teams would pressure him. Now he's the best quarterback there is in the league under pressure. I mean, his stats are off the charts. And so that's something you get comfortable in a system. You know where guys are supposed to be. You know what your responsibilities are. And they have some talented players to go along with them. Jamison Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown. They got what do they call it? Sonic and Knuckles. That's what they've named themselves in the backfield. Kind of the heavy hitting guy in is it Washington?
No, Montgomery.
Montgomery, sorry.
Yeah, Montgomery
and Gibbs. And so they got the speed and the thunder there. And, Laporta's a great tight end. And so they've done a great job. And you can't help but look at Coach Dan Campbell and say, man, that's a guy you'd love to play for. Just passionate. The guys, kind of rally around him, which is that's more of a college thing, I would say, especially for some of these other coaches who are more X's and O's. This guy is a true grinder, former tight end, gets people going. And, it was a great game. The Vikings battled their way through it, and they got Jefferson a touchdown. It was just one of those games as a football fan you love to watch.
I mean, I think Jared Goff obviously has been super impressive, but I was looking at Sam Darnold's stat line, like he wasn't bad either. I think he threw 4 or 5 incompletions, and so kind of to your point, I do think it's cool that, these are 2 guys that maybe said the league maybe would done with, they are what they are. It is what it is. And to see both of them have them success, I think is awesome. And, and then I didn't know anything about Detroit's kicker, and then there's coming out dude was selling bricks. That's what makes football so great. And I think it just goes to something like taking advantage of the opportunities you get, and you never know when they're going to come. And, you better be ready for them. And those are 3 guys, and I know there's tons more, but those are 3 guys, I think have done a great job of that, and with whatever you want to call it, second chance, whatever. So, I thought that was a great game. I didn't get to watch much of it, saw a lot of the highlights. I love watching Justin Jefferson play football. He's, it's really cool to see as a fan and stuff, when you watch guys at an elite level do things. And I think, being in the sport, you have such more of a appreciation of when guys are doing that, just how hard and how impressive that is. So, I think that's going to be a great division to watch down the stretch because I mean, you could have all 4 teams fighting for playoff spots. Which I don't know when the last time that's been done. But
well, that division too used to be. I mean, it used to be Green Bay, and everybody else was kind of just average or below average. In all honesty, it was one of the lesser divisions in all of football. And now you look at it, and I know that leads us to the next game you want to talk about, Danny. But that division is pretty much, I don't want to call it stacked, but every team
they're going to be
is playing lights out.
They're going to be fighting for the playoffs. Like every team is, and I think Minnesota and Detroit are going to be locks, and then Green Bay and Chicago, don't rule them out, and so that's going to be exciting to see what happens down the stretch with that division.
Yeah, you said it, NFC North. I mean, coming into last week in Week 7, Green Bay was actually tied for last at 4-2, but they got the win this week over the Texans at home at Lambeau. Another last-second field goal, 24-22. C.J. Stroud only had 86 passing yards in this game, kind of wild, and then Jordan Love, wild stats as well. I think after Monday Night Football, Baker now leads the league in touchdowns, but he's second in touchdown passes and tied with Mahomes for most interceptions. So he's kind of got that Brett Favre stat line. And he's missed 2 games.
And he missed 2 games,
wild. Yeah, which is wild. But yeah, Green Bay is looking good too.
I think that just speaks to that division. And also I think the thing is, the Texans are a team, and obviously we know this came down to a game-winning field goal, but that's, when you read that stat line and C.J. Stroud only threw for 86 yards, and I know Nico Collins was out, but that kind of speaks to that defense.
That's
obviously, someone in the Boston area familiar with Jeff Hafley, who I was on a few teams with in my NFL career. He leaves to be the head coach at BC to be the defensive coordinator for the Packers, and has them rolling. They add Xavier McKinney, a safety who's really good. They have Quay Walker. They got Rashawn Gary. Unfortunately for me, I had to deal with those guys back in 2022, and Rashawn Gary knocked me out of the game. So, when you think of the Packers, you kind of think of the Jordan Love and their offense because Matt LaFleur is the head coach, but their defense is getting it done as well. And to hold C.J. Stroud and that offense to only 86 yards of passing is actually a pretty impressive thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you kind of hit the nail on the head. I was going to give their defense the props because, it was one of those things where they had good players. Like Kenny Clark's a top D tackle in the league. Rashawn Gary's a great DN. Preston Smith, another great player. Jair Alexander, great corner. And then you talked about McKinney, adding him, but they've always had good defensive players, but it never seemed like they were living up to that potential. And I think now you put a team like that, and obviously got an offensive head coach, and I think he does a great job. And have found some more skill players, and Jordan Love's playing good, and playing good enough to win. And but I look at a team like that and have always thought that defense could be better. They have the names and the players, so hats off to them. And I think they're playing really good defensive football right now, which is dangerous.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it is.
I know I said the Niners were my Super Bowl pick out of the NFC a few weeks ago, but I think it's going to be an NFC North team. And speaking of the Niners, we had a Super Bowl rematch, Chiefs-Niners, in San Fran, 28-18. Chiefs got the dub. Mahomes looked all right, still has more interceptions than touchdown passes, which is crazy. Brandon Ayuk for the Niners tore his ACL. He went down, so they're banged up. But it was kind of a blowout, and it wasn't a great game to watch. But, what do we think here, Hoyer?
It's amazing. I think, I got interviewed last week by Henry McKenna, an article he was doing comparing the Chiefs to the Patriots of old. And I said to him, the one thing that you have there is some continuity amongst leadership, and you have a really good head coach, you have a quarterback, and I know they aren't really figuring it out on offense yet, and we keep saying every week, oh, maybe they will, but their defense is carrying them. Their defense is tremendous. Shout out to Spagnuolo, who's been the DC there, obviously a former head coach, but he's really, if you go back to when the Chiefs really started this, let's call it quote unquote their little run that they've been on. I don't want to, if you want to call it a dynasty yet, but it was more offensive driven. And now the defense is really carrying the majority of the weight while the offense is trying to figure out their identity. They've dealt with some injury issues, Isaiah Pacheco being out, Rashee Rice, but it's one of those things where you kind of feel like they'll figure it out because they have Patrick Mahomes, they have Andy Reid, they got Kelsey, they got a good offensive line. Pacheco will get back. They'll figure out who they are. But so much of that is we talk about is figuring out your identity. And I don't know if they've figured that out yet. But to be, 7-0, 6-0 at this point, and the offense is not where it's been, that's kind of a scary thing for the rest of the league.
Yeah, look, I think people are going to tear down Mahomes and the whatever, right? That's natural. And you saw it here with Tom at times, because things aren't going great. But at the end of the day, It's all about winning. They're the last unbeaten team in the NFL.
That's right.
Like, they're finding ways to win. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. If they make it to the Super Bowl and Mahomes throws for 50 yards and 4 interceptions and somehow they win, it doesn't matter. Like, that's not good, but, like, it doesn't matter. They just won a Super Bowl and 31 other teams are sitting on their ass at home. So,
Yep.
It really doesn't matter as long as you find ways to win. And I think that's impressive watching them do that. And obviously, like, to sit here and say it's going to be okay, that's not true. You want to improve and try to get better and things like that. And, they'll do that. And obviously, I think last year, like, everyone was tearing them down. Like, oh, their offense isn't this, they're not this, they're not that. All right, well, they're still in the Super Bowl and still winning. So, it's all about finding ways to win, and I think they've done a great job of that. And, I think that's another team you talk about defensively playing really good football. And, Spags does such a great job. It's a hard scheme, throwing a lot of different looks at you.
Yeah, the Kansas City Chiefs have become the villains of the NFL.
When you win,
quickly.
you're the villains. That's just how it goes.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's why people used to always be, they hated it when I played for the Patriots. I'm like, why do you hate the Patriots so much? But now I get it, because when you find, they're not playing well, they keep winning. But I think that speaks to the culture that they've built there. And sometimes when you establish that winning culture, you can get through these things just on, toughness and grit and all of those things. And so I think they've built something like that and kept that core group of guys around to be able to trickle that out to some of the new guys that come. And even in one sense, they brought some guys back, Juju Smith-Schuster, Kareem Hunt. They've brought guys back who were kind of there in the early days too.
Yeah, another couple teams that I absolutely hate as a Patriots fan, the Eagles and the Giants, a couple teams we've lost Super Bowls to. But I only bring this game up. I mean, it was a complete blowout, 28-3. But Saquon Barkley, Giants didn't sign him this offseason. They gave him the contract he wanted. He goes to the rival Philly, and he has 176 rushing yards and was phenomenal against his old team. So I just wanted your guys' perspective on kind of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a kind of a revenge game for Saquon. And I know we talked about Bill earlier, and he kind of mocked the Giants a little bit. He's like, yeah, they could have, for a few extra million, they could have kept Saquon, but they got a guard instead. I mean, typical in Bill fashion to kind of give a little jibe in there. But he looked incredible. I mean, Philly's just one of those teams. I mean, the week before, people were ripping Nick Sirianni because he's talking trash to the fans at a home game. And so it's just like you kind of don't know what you're going to get from those guys. But a few years ago, they were in the Super Bowl. And having a guy like Saquon and adding him to a Jalen Hurts, I know it's not exactly Lamar and Derrick Henry, but that is a two-headed duo that can wreak havoc on a defense, because obviously they both can run the ball very well. Saquon's great in the pass game, and obviously Hurts can throw the ball too, because they have some dynamic receivers. So they're one of those teams, I think, they kind of, you've seen it with them, they kind of ride the wave a little bit, and right now the wave's going well and they're playing well. But last year we saw they lost a lot of games consecutively, and that's just kind of you got to have that maturity and say, okay, we lost a game, what are we going to do to bounce back? And so right now things are going well, and Saquon looks like a great addition to their offensive scheme.
Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know what it's like as a player, but I'm sure Saquon was so sick and tired of all the questions and all that. Like, it is what it is. Like, that's happened. Like, and I'm sure he would have stayed in New York if they offered him a deal, and that's part of it. That's part of the business. And like, I've always found it interesting when fans get mad at a player for they should get mad at the organization. Like, they're the ones that didn't give him the money. Mm-hmm. Like, he's obviously worth it, and then you look at guys like a Brandon Ayuk, guys fighting, for their money and their contract, because in a blink it's gone, and it could be gone. And so, I know that, it's such an important thing, and I understand fans being frustrated because he wasn't at training camp, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but as a player, I think you understand both sides of that, and because it's same to me, 3 games in and then it's over, and it's unfortunate, and we've talked about the business side and the money, so I understand guys doing that and trying to look out for themselves, because at the end of the day, like we talked about, the train's going to keep going and the organization moves on. So you got to try to look at it for yourself in some aspects, but yeah, don't get mad at Saquon, get mad at the Giants. They should have paid him. He's worth it, obviously.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree. And there was this cool mic'd up clip of Saquon on the
I
bench
wish he would have broken
after he had 100.
I get it, but
The 13 yards.
Yeah, go get it, dude.
Yeah, he had 13 yards for his career high in a game. He was, like I said, 176. And then Sirianni came up to him on the bench, was like, "Hey, you got 13 yards. You want me to put you back in? I'm throwing all the backups in, but I'd love you to get it." And Saquon was kind of like, "Nah, it's all good. Let the young guys get some."
I would have loved to see him break it, but I get it.
Yeah, I think he should have.
It is. It kind of speaks to his character. I've always liked watching him play, but I think, well, I don't want to bring this up, but you talk about injuries, but Godwin, has a severe lower leg injury last night with, I don't know how much time is left. At a certain point, yeah, it's just, you see what the game is, and it's just not, it's not worth it to put those guys out there. I get it. Like, they're trying to make a comeback and you're trying to build off of something going into the next week. And I don't question that decision, but it just goes to show you what can happen. What is that? Murphy's Law, whatever can happen will happen. Yeah. I remember that from Interstellar, I think. So I don't know. I mean, it's great, but it's great to see a guy who doesn't put individual success over the success of the team. I think that's always, refreshing to see.
I still would have liked to see him break it. It's 13 yards.
That would have been good. That would have been good. All right. Well, that's a wrap on episode 10. Can you guys believe you made it 10 episodes? I mean,
no, I ain't been fired yet, so it could be coming, though.
Yeah. I might be.
Danny might be fired late. Yeah. Mike muted.
You might owe me like a coffee or something for being late. But then I also had some technical difficulties. So the podcast is fighting for our lives. Everyone's just battling except for Hoy. Hoy's just sitting in his house enjoying himself. Me and Danny are out here just grinding.
Yeah. Grinding. Right. Well, David, keep getting better. Keep rehabbing. And we'll see you next week.
All right. See you guys.